Good evening. My name is Steve Worthington. I'm the mayor of University Place, and we're calling the January 3rd, 2023 meeting to order of the University Place City Council. And we'll start with a roll call.
Councilmember Wood, present.
Councilmember Fleming. Councilmember Belisi.
Councilmember Belisi here.
Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa.
Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa here.
Councilmember Keel. And Mayor Worthington.
Mayor, let's see if I can turn the mic on. Mayor Worthington here. Thank you. And next would be the Pledge of Allegiance. And Councilmember McCluskey, would you be kind enough to lead us this evening?
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you. And that brings us to the approval of the agenda for this evening. And is there a motion?
Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa makes a motion to approve the agenda, please.
Thank you. We have a motion for approval of the agenda. Is there a second?
Councilmember Belisi, I second.
Thank you, Councilmember Belisa. We have a motion and a second. Are there any objections to the approval of the agenda as distributed? Any objections? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. We can move on to public comments, and it's excuse me. We're now in our public comment portion of the evening, and it is at this time we take comments from our from the public about items that are not on tonight's agenda. You will have 3 minutes available for you to address the council. I don't think we have anyone signed up tonight. Okay, but nonetheless, if you'd like to address the council, just make yourself known, and we'll certainly welcome you to the mic. And anybody'd like to make a comment to the council? I'm not seeing any. Do we have any online? I don't have my teams up right now to tell. If there's anybody online, the directions on the online process are on the screen now and have been for the last couple of minutes. And they'll describe how to open your mic or let yourself be known, and we'll activate it and be able to make comments from an online presence. And I don't, Deborah, do we have anybody there? All right. So I don't see anyone coming forward for public comments. We'll close our public comments and then move on to the consent agenda. And is there a motion on the consent agenda?
Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa motions to approve the consent agenda as proposed.
All right. Thank you. A motion to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Councilmember Belisi, I second.
Very good. Councilmember Belisi, a motion and approval for the motion for approval of the consent agenda. Do we have any objections to the consent agenda as it's been distributed? Anyone want to take an item off consent? I don't see any. And with that in mind, without objection, then we are approving the consent agenda. Then we can move on to our next order of business, which would be the city manager report. So.
Mayor, members of the council, I'm going to ask Parks and Public Works Director Jack Eckler to come up and give you a short briefing about Cirque Park and an update.
Welcome, Jack.
So tonight I'm giving a quick update on a couple of items for Cirque Park. And one is I'm happy to announce our grant agreement, our long-awaited grant agreement from RCO and the National Park Service has been, we've received it back today from the folks, and so we have the green light to move forward. So our first two steps on that will be starting the contracts for the skate. That's the grant. Kind of backing up has both. There's three aspects to that grant. It is replacement and some upgrades to the skate park of the wooden structures that were in the skate park. Then paving the perimeter trail around the ball field, connecting to both sides of the parking lot, and with that also installing some exercise station along the paved trail. And then third component of that is the playground that we've talked about quite a bit already in the past. But so our first two steps of that will be to start the contracts for both the skate park work, because that's on a state contract, so we can move straight with that, as well as the exercise stations. And once we get the exercise stations kind of in concert with that, we'll do a contract for the paving of the path. And then the playground itself, that's going to be coordinated with that the Inclusive Playground Group that's doing their work separately, that will be kind of all incorporated together. Which leads me to the second topic related to Cirque Park, and that is, so the University Place Parks and Recreation Foundation, as well as their partner with the Cal Ripken Senior Foundation, they're getting ready to kick off their fundraising efforts for the Inclusive Playground, and they are still also considering a potential for doing some upgrades to the ball fields as well, but that obviously would need to come back to council before they move forward. But with their fundraising efforts, they are recommending that they would allow for a potential naming of like a playground or a ball fields associated with a higher, like a large donor, right? So like, for example, a good example of this is, the Furcrest Recreation Center that was just recently built. The Names Foundation was a huge, one of the primary contributors to that. And so that community center's officially named I think they're called the Names Community Center at Furcrest. And so that's around the kind of thing that they're looking for. And so they've asked us for what our process is. Apparently, when they had done, I know the Cal Ripken group had done some sort of thing in the city of Spokane a year or so ago, and apparently they got the cart a little ahead of the horse, where they had sold the naming right, and then they hadn't checked with the city of Spokane first. And so fortunately it all worked out, and they got the playground and the name all squared away, but there was a little bit tense situation. So they want to make sure we're doing it the right way this time. So we've looked at it, and there are, this will, we currently do not have a policy in place for this type of thing. And so, we can, I guess it depends how council would like to go, but there could be a couple, provided we're interested in moving this route, there could be an action just specific to Cirque Park, but then that may also then ultimately lead itself into a general policy throughout our parks. A couple of the questions that I had, and I've talked to the group about, is, how does some of this thing, how these would work, and what kind of controls and limitations on the namings we could have. In this case, there is some flexibility, or there would be, I guess, whatever flexibility we wanted. But a couple of the issues could be, they've run into is, like a specific, like corporate names or something, where it may or may not, like they use an example of, like, if, not that they're looking at this, but let's say if Anheuser-Busch wanted to name the field, right? There may or may not be someone crazy about being called Anheuser-Busch Field or not, but maybe it would be something like the Cirque, or not field, the playground, right? But maybe it's the Cirque Park Playground, sponsored or presented by Anheuser-Busch or something like that. Not once again, not that Anheuser-Busch is looking at it, I'm using their name as an example. But, so that's if it's, we don't like the ring of, Target or Walmart or whatever is the field. It could be more like a sponsored by or presented by. Another issue could be, and I asked about, because you hear this in the news quite a bit, where let's say a donor or someone or a corporation or donor donates the money, everything seems, you do your due diligence, everything seems up and up, and then later out you find out that maybe there's some problematic issue with the person or a primary person, a corporation. You don't want to have forever then be linked to that. And they said that's something that could be also noted in your contract, that you'd have an ability to, if there is some illegal or nefarious activity associated with either the company or the person, that you would be able to, change the name in that way. Another question that came up is a potential time limit, or when would you be able to rename, or if it is in perpetuity? And they said that you could either do it a specific, or a combination of this, a specific time frame that you would commit to, or a time in which that improvement was in place, and then if it needed a refurbishment or rehabilitation, then the rights could reset. Or it could also, you could have a caveat that if, let's say, it's a corporation or a business that sponsored it, but they're no longer in business, like I think of the Mariner Stadium or Safeco Field. We had, for a while, it was Safeco Field, and there was no Safeco anymore. And so that type of thing, if they're not in business. So those are all things that they have experienced, and they would be able to, I think the idea is that they would give us an example of some of the contracts they've seen in the past, and then we could look at that, have Matt look at his legal eye through it, and then get back to you on those type of things. One of their timing, and then I did tell them so their goal is to start kicking off their fundraising in February. I did say February is probably a little tight for us to have an official action on that sort of thing. But they are hoping for just a general either idea, if this is something, a direction that council is interested in pursuing, that at least would give them some direction to know what they're looking at. And then also, I also wanted to get input from council if there's any other specific questions that you'd like to see us ask the Cal Ripken and the UP Foundation folks of any questions or concerns we'd have for this.
All right.
So that's pretty much what I have on this, but
Okay. Well, thank you. Appreciate hearing about the concept, Mr. Eklund. And council, at this point, I think this is just to get this on your radar more than anything else. If you have specific questions, perhaps you can contact either Steve Sugg or Jack Eklund and articulate what those questions are. And then they can prepare some information for us in an upcoming meeting, assuming we have general interest in this. And I guess it would be helpful to know if we do have general interest in this, not saying yes to it, but just want to hear more. Is this a way that we could fund an important project in our community?
Yeah, I think it's appropriate for us to at least consider and look at it.
Okay. All right. That's my sense from the council. So, all right. Well, great. Well, thank you for the update.
thank you.
Mr. Sugg, anything else?
That is it, Mayor. Council, I'll turn it back to you.
All right. Great. Well, appreciate that. And then we'll move on to council comments then. And with that, that brings us to, oh, by the way, let the record show that Councilmember Keel joined us several minutes, 10 or 12 minutes ago, something like that, please. And speaking of which, Councilmember Keel, your chance to make any comments this evening?
Great, thank you.
I'm sorry, yes, let's get that mic. We're trying to work with all the mics on tonight, so let's see how
Great,
that.
thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Happy New Year, everyone. My apologies for being a little bit late. Sometimes you just can't get there from here or hear from there in time. So just tonight, I just want to just remind everyone, what I announced in December. As of today, as of the first of this month, we're no longer, I'm no longer your representative of Pierce Transit. That has gone over to the city of Fircrest. I still haven't seen who they appointed, but the first meeting is next Monday, and that person will be seated there. And as far as Sound Transit, I am happy to report that after 3 years, today, I'm no longer the chair of Sound Transit. I've been appointed vice chair from Pierce County, but not having to sit in that seat is, as many of you would know, it's a good relief, So about that. The other thing I want to report on January 19th, I'm going to host the deputy administrator from FAA, and so I'm still working out with his staff now. He wants to talk with me and then have a tour of some of the South End Sound Transit facilities. But my goal is to actually host him here at our facility, and the goal there is to get our city exposed to the deputy administrator for FAA. I mean, how often does that happen? You know, so give them a little tour, what our city's about, and you know, who knows what that could lead to sometime in the future. So I'm hopeful, and I'm still working the details out with Sound Transit CEO and also with Steve Sugg. So I'll have a report once that meeting happens.
Very good. Well, thank you for those updates, and no, it's an excellent idea to get the attention for our community. And by the way, thank you for 3 years of service on Sound Transit. That's outstanding, and that really has highlighted UP and the association. We appreciated your hard work and also keeping our viewpoints near to the center of Sound Transit's goals. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's see, next we have Councilmember Wood. And let me see if I can get your mic on. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. My only comment is Happy New Year.
All right. Very good.
Thank you.
Excellent. And then Councilmember McCluskey. Let's get you on too.
Okay, thank you, and also Happy New Year to everybody. Hopefully they had a wonderful holiday with their family or friends, or however they celebrate it. I also would like to give a shout out to our staff. I recently had a meeting with some citizens and brought forward this morning an issue that they're going to be working on, and they were quick. I was turning around, doing other things, and all of a sudden, Mr. Sugg asked me to come into a meeting, collected all of his staff. They were on point and focused and willing to research it. So I just want to give you and your staff a huge shout out from the dais for being so reactive, interactive, compassionate, and understanding.
Very good. That's great to hear. Thank you. And then Councilmember Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be short. It's great to have a new year. It's great to be back in chamber. But I do want to thank the city public works folks for that recent ice storm. I seem to have been the only car out on the road that next morning, but I know, but I had to be. But those roads were safe, and I appreciated the work they all did on that one. So thank you.
Excellent, and a good response. Lots of challenges during the winter time, and this holiday season particularly, it seems. But Public Works is there for us. Councilmember Polisi.
I just wanted to wish our citizens a Happy New Year. And I just wanted to wish our citizens a Happy New Year and hope that you had a safe and wonderful holiday season. And I would like to send some kudos to our Pierce County Fire Department and their prompt response to the king tide that was experienced on Day Island. I know from residents that are down there that was probably a pretty traumatic event so close to the holidays. And I also want to say thank you to the Public Works crew. The past December was pretty tough with our icy weather, and roads along Bridgeport and our main arterials were passable, and I think our citizens appreciated that prompt and efficient response. And I know that our crews had to spend some time away from their families as they were on duty 24 hours during those events. So they do give a lot of time and energy to make sure that our citizens are safe. So again, Happy New Year. Let's hope we don't have any more incidences this winter.
Indeed. Good. Well, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa, any comments this evening?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a few. First of all, I was very lucky that there was no meetings from any of my committees. That being said, though, I do want to say, like everybody else, Happy New Year's, and looking forward to a great year with, in our city with our citizens. And it's definitely appreciate last year's, and I will appreciate this year's staff work and keeping the city operable and in operation, and most importantly, which is the key thing, and that is how they deal with our citizens. And I think that that has been one of the key elements that has kept our citizens very happy, and that is that their contact with the staff is superb, and I do appreciate it, Steve. That being said, I also want to extend that to our two council members that came on board in January, Stan and Edward. And I say that because you never know who comes on board and the flow of the council. And I really feel that that the flow has been very good and actually excellent, and the how we work together. I think the citizens made a great choice when they selected both of you. Thank you. And Councilmember Keel, not only as the chair of the transit, but the president of AWC and the chair of Pierce Transit, I think you took a huge load on behalf of the city and this council to represent us, and you did that well. And it reflects on what you did. It reflects and will reflect in the future what happens here in UP. So thank you. So with that, thank you, Mayor.
Absolutely. Very good. Well, let me, in which case it's my turn for some quick comments, and just starting as we all have, essentially, with wishing all a Happy New Year on the council, in the community, and on the staff. So as we move forward into the next year, and 2022 was a good year in a number of ways. In fact, we're going to talk about some of that at the next meeting. But for right now, just recognizing 2023, we're going to continue on and doing our good work, and our staff's very good professional efforts is how we get there. And so I think with that, I'm going to wrap up the comments for council and just move us on into our study session. So we're going to move out of our regular meeting and into study session now. Starting with that, we're going to have a chance to take a look at work programs that have been submitted to us for consideration by our various boards and commissions, and I think our first one up is the Economic Development Advisory Commission and such. So, thank you.
Welcome.
Is that how you motivate speakers down there?
Welcome, Mr. Coons. Thank you. Oh, good.
There we go. Okay. Can you all hear me okay? Mm-hmm. Okay, so nice to see everyone again. Good evening. Happy New Year. I'm Joshua Kuntz. I'm the Vice Chair of the Economic Development Advisory Commission. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our goals for 2023 and what we're going to be working on. And these are all in support of City Council goal number 2, which is focused efforts to strengthen the business community. One other thing I would say just right off the bat is these are on purpose, rather general. So we can take on projects through other commissions, City Council throughout the year. Then we have the resources to actually do that throughout the year. So I will run through these here, and then if you have any questions, just let me know. I think you have this work plan in your packets. The first two are kind of just the general ones that we have basically every year to interact with the UP businesses. The first one is to interact with the business community. This is really what we do with when new businesses are opening, helping them with their business licenses as well as the ribbon cuttings, supporting those as well. And then number 2 is just working with the Planning Commission to facilitate communication between the different commissions. The next 2 that we have on here are also just working with the Planning Commission, specifically on the sub-area district plan for the Northeast Business District, as well as the 27th Street Regional Growth Sub-Area Plan, potential impacts for that, and then completing the project in 2022 for the Northeast Business District. Next 2 that we have on here are staff actions, and so the staff is going to be working on study of business startup costs, and then bringing that to the commission for our input, and if we have anything to provide as far as feedback on that. And then the other next staff action is the analysis of business sectors in University Place. Same thing, when that is complete, it is coming to our commission for feedback and analysis in our meetings. And then the final one we have here is to provide input and development on wayfinding signs. I believe this one was approved for the budget for 2023. And so when the council actually brings that forward to us, then we will look at that and provide input as needed. So, like I mentioned, that is what we're going to be working on in 2023, but again, it's on purpose general, so we can take on projects throughout the year for whatever comes up from commissions or the council.
Thank you, appreciate that. And thank you, Mr. Kuntz, for putting that together for us, and and the commission as well. So, council, just to put all this in some sort of context, here's an opportunity for us to ask about any of these projects or our proposed work plans, and just to get further definition or see if we want any changes. Ultimately, we're going to put these into a resolution and then bring that back to council for formal recognition and adoption. So, Councilmember Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your presentation tonight. I know all our commissions are important. This one is very important in terms of vitality and viability of our city and the connection with the business community. The one that caught my attention, though, is the very first part of the work plan, where you pointed out about wanting to connect with the business community by attending ribbon cuttings. Has the commission given any thought about going beyond that? I mean, the ribbon cuttings are superficial. They're perfunctory, and we all kind of show up and have a good time. But what's really important of keeping the business community connected with the city is the ongoing interaction and engagement. If it's not day to day or week to week, it's at least month to month of, keeping their ear and figuring out what's making the business community hum or not hum. So has the commission had any conversation, and if so, how do they foresee that?
Yeah, I think the ribbon cutting started, I guess, shortly after COVID, when we were really ramping up, and I think they're really just a jumping off point to make sure that the businesses know about the commission as well as the staff. So Becky really focuses on them and then follows up with them monthly after that to make sure that they know of the resources that are available, which I think is really the most important part of the ribbon cutting, to say, like, you have the commission, you have for interaction between the different commissions, as well as the staff within the city to help with whatever it may be, whether it's your business license or further development of your business. So that's really introducing our commission and the staff is what the ribbon cutting should
And
be
I think
about.
those are really good things, but what about the commissioners themselves being engaged with the business community versus the staff?
Yeah. I think that's, we try to attend as many as we can. We're also trying to bring businesses into our monthly meetings. So we've had a new business in each one of our meetings every month to try and engage with as much as they can. So, so they know about the commission as well. So I think that's our next step. But yeah, any additional feedback for how we could engage more is welcome.
Yeah, I think one of the things I've learned when I'm out and about is just going in and talking to the manager, introducing myself, asking how things are going, how is their relationship with the city, what can we be doing better, and getting that kind of feedback also helps. So I would encourage commissioners to consider doing something along those lines also. It's just, you're kind of poly-populating the businesses, not just with staff and council members, but, you know, our commissioners also. I mean, they're extremely important to the city, so,
Yeah, absolutely.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councilmember Wood.
Thank you, Mayor. So quick question for you, and this may actually extend to city staff. So when you talked about monitoring, providing input to findings from the study of business startup costs, as I recall, and please correct me if I'm wrong, we had also talked about barriers to entry to the market or how difficult it was to establish a business in UP and the permitting process, whether in UP or with Pierce County, because they obviously influence a lot what we do. Do we have progress? Are you guys going to be engaged in that, or is that something city staff is working on right now? Where are we at with that process?
And Kevin can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's part of the plan for the study of the business startup costs is.
Yes, Kevin Brisky with the Community and Economic Development Department. Councilmember Wood, yes, they monitor and provide input to findings from this study of business startup costs. Would also include exactly what you're talking about. It would be startup costs, would be permitting, any other regulatory requirements. And where we're at on that is, you know, that's proposed here in the work plan, and if the work plan gets adopted, then we would start that process immediately, as we have it in the first quarter.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Wood. Now, Councilmember Keel, followed by Councilmember McCluskey. So.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your report. Everything on here we've talked about a lot and heard from, and people are asking questions, and I think they're spot on, things that need to happen. I'm particularly interested in working with you guys, working with the Planning Commission on the sub-area district plan and all those things like that. One of the other things that I've mentioned, I don't know, 7 or 8 years now, and it hasn't really gotten any legs, and I'll just try it again this year as well. Is when you think about University Place as a city and other cities around, a few other cities around the country, a lot of them have an identity. I mean, when you think of Branson, you just think about country music and Grand Ole Opry and all those places like that, or Dallas or New York. And again, I get all these are large cities, but there are a number of small cities that actually have that identity. And I muse about us as a city having that type of an identity. And I even floated the idea around healthy living and all that stuff, and then all of a sudden we get Whole Foods, we get Harbor Greens, and now we got all these parks, and we got Trek bicycle, and just all of these things that kind of centers around that. I'm just curious, has the commission even thought about this branding kind of a notion for our city? I mean, to begin to attract people and residents and things like that, so that when they think of University Place, well, I mean, we kind of halfway, I guess, have the golf course, but other local cities are trying to grab that from us, But I'm just curious, is there any thought about that at all?
Kim, you might be able to answer that. As businesses are talking to you coming into University Place, right? What do you sell them on? And
Yeah, I
think it
can't
would
hear
be
you, I'm
what you were
sorry.
talking about as far
We
as
really
like-
can't hear you, so can you move the mic to you?
Sure. Do you want to answer that?
I don't think the commission has spoken, I think, directly about branding overall. I mean, there's been talk around branding and, the identity of the city. But a branding exercise like you're talking about would be a little more probably intense and more detailed.
Yeah, and that's fair, and that's fine. And I apologize if you feel like you've been put on the spot. That wasn't my intention. It was really called to the conversation that we've had between council and that, and maybe that's something, Mayor, that I some topic. I know we got our agenda kind of set, but sometime between now and December, I'd like to have that conversation again to find out what the viability of that notion is, right? We talk about economic development. We talk about, us as a community and all that kind of thing. And with all the stuff and amenities that we have, I mean, that's the one piece, though, I think that would be very helpful, I think, for citizens and for businesses and to grow our economics.
Well, thank you, Councilmember Keel. Not to turn the focus of this into something else than the work plan for the commission right now, but we could also think about this as more of a strategic plan and a SWOT analysis that leads us to our strengths and understanding how we can package those. So maybe that's branding, maybe it's something different, but that's,
Yeah.
So, as we think about future work plans, and actually there is an opportunity here to adjust this work plan if there's, if we can define that. Not maybe this minute, but yeah.
Well, if there is an opportunity, then I'd like to take that just a few days to kind of think about my thoughts, and then what does it look like in the context of this work plan. I think there's a piece to the work plan that could lead us to that. I just need to give some more thought for a suggestion.
So we think about maybe what the steps are there. I don't know what level of interest we have, and that's, and I guess I'm looking for a little bit of feedback, not to get too sideways on this, so, okay.
Okay.
But Councilman McCluskey, you were next up, yes.
Okay. We did a branding exercise prior to the U.S. Open, and I think we need to dust off that document for a starting point and see what the trajectory is for that. I'm not really interested in putting any more money or funding in it or giving it to the Planning Commission until the council looks at that and wraps its head around it and figures out what is the next logical steps to take it. Right now, as Councilmember Belisi nodded to me, we are the medical and dental mecca of Pierce County. Healthy living component, for sure.
Yeah, it is component.
No, I don't know if we want to go with that in perpetuity, so I'll be inclined at least for a discussion on that, for sure. One of my understanding here where the asterisks are, you're still waiting a budget approval or maybe a council directive that's more specific. So the council has some work to do prior to implementing those with the asterisks, or is that my understanding?
I think it's, if I may, I believe it's more about the date at which this document was prepared. The budget's been approved
Okay.
now, so.
All right, that's what I was assuming.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so I'll move on from that. The other area that the Narrows is on its way with the apartment complex and different things, and for sure maybe a little bit of branding and lifestyle-centric sort of thing, but I like to see organically how that emerges with the new development there. But 27th Business District, I would like to, as a council member, to see a more visioning amongst the current business owners. In the last year, I noticed that several new owners have taken their properties and has made it a little more aesthetically appealing. And I would like that to kind of synergize throughout the rest of the district so that when people travel through it or to a particular vendor that's there, they'll see that it's a pleasing place to come. And also looking at some of the vacant properties there on how to get them lively again, becoming a viable business as well. Because I think the town center and Narrows, and along that 27th corridor that includes the 27th and Grandview properties. I think that's really strategic, and that is a real catalyst so that people will come to University Place specifically for that area. Maybe they can figure out some vendor-ish like events to promote themselves, and like Proctor does. They have a farmer's market. They also, during the farmer's market, the storefronts have different things of interest that people can walk along the streets and see that, so.
Yeah, the 27th Street is definitely a focus for the year, and I think there was a period of time where we were working on a farmer's market, and it was trying to get off the ground a little bit, but we will definitely talk with the business owners in that area and see what we can do to help out as well.
The sub-area plan and that redesign is really important, but also in the meantime,
Yeah.
because, that's really market-driven for the developers to come in the future, what's currently in the next 2 or 3 years that we can do to make that area pop, so that people will become lively with certain events and, areas of fun for them to come and partake.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, I have a comment, but I wanted to check and see if there was any other, I have a question or other, but any other council questions before I move on to mine? Okay. With that, the second bullet on the work plan, second from the bottom, it reads, monitor and provide input to findings from the analysis of business sectors in University Place. And I was just wondering if Mr. Kuntz or Kevin, if either one of you could just just help me get my mentally my arms around that a little bit more.
Yeah, it's a staff work action.
It goes a little bit hand in hand with the study for the business startup costs, but essentially, and this was talked a little bit about at the retreat a year ago retreat, and it was the sales tax leakage kind of information, trying to do an analysis of the existing business that we have and what we may be lacking.
Okay, and where those gap analyses are. So,
Yeah.
Okay, more of that. Taking a look at that, if there's some opportunities for us there. Okay, thank you. Just wanted to, as I said, sort of be able to understand that. Great. Any other questions or comments before we move on at this point? Okay, great. Well, thank you. Obviously, a good stimulating conversation for us, and appreciated the commission and your work as chair getting that ready for us. We'll get this back to us, as I mentioned, in a work plan resolution, more formally authorizing things. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. That brings us to, excuse me, I have to look on the agenda to see which one is up next. Our Park Advisory Commission, and Ms. Wolf.
I don't think she heard you. Oh, she did, okay.
Great.
Just real quick before I turn it over to Amy, and Amy's our vice chair of the Park Commission, and but one thing in your packet, because I found myself doing this, so I want to make sure. We have included in the packet both this year's work plan and, just for reference, last year's.
Okay.
And so just make sure while you're following along that you're seeing what the one that says 2023 work plan, because I was looking, I was like, these are familiar, but didn't seem to be what we talked about. But then I realized I was on the wrong page. So anyway, with that, then I'll also ask Tony
Great.
to answer any supplemental questions.
It's helpful to have the prior year plan, but yes, appreciate you helping us put that in the right frame.
And if you can speak up have the mic up to you close so we can hear you clearly, please.
Can you hear me okay now?
We're
Sorry.
doing good.
Hi, my name's Amy Wolf. I'm the vice chair of the Parks Advisory Commission, and I'm just going to talk about our 2022 and 2023 goals. So I'll just go over our 2022 goals quickly. So for 2022, we were helping the staff with the RCL grant application for Curran Apple Orchard. And we also were helping with the restroom, providing some recommendations for the restroom for the Curran Apple Orchard. We did a letter for that. And we're also helping with the homestead design. We worked with a consultant. GGLO, I think, was a consultant that we were just providing support for that. And we also kind of looked over the CIRC master plan and also worked with Chris Saunders for the inclusive playground for CIRC that will be happening at CIRC. And also we're also working with Tony for the, just providing advice for the boardwalk connection from Adriana Hess to Paradise Pond, the grant application for that. And there were a few other things we had talking about. We did a flash vote for the little 1 acre park at 27th Street in Elwood because it's been empty for so long, and we just kind of wanted to get a feel for what people thought could happen there at that little spot. We also worked with Tony, or talking about getting hiring that's actually 2023, hiring a master planning firm to work on Creekside Park. So for 2023, so we're going to continue working on the inclusive playground at CIRC Park. And working with Chris Saunders on that. And then continuing to work on the CIRC Park study and plan review, so, and helping, and then selecting a consultant to do a feasibility study for CIRC Park for, potentially doing like a community center like what Furcrest has at CIRC Park. And then also, same for Creekside Park, getting a consultant to do a master plan kind of feasibility study for Creekside Parks, are supporting for that. And also talking about getting staff support for the park and maintenance, having long-term staff because they're really understaffed right now, so having more staff would be really beneficial. And also talking about promoting youth sports and recreation programs in UP. Since we don't have anything, the rec department anymore, maybe we talked about joining or somehow doing something with Furcrest, maybe we co-op with them. And then just our last goal, so number 6, our last goal is just continued discussions as needed or requested by city council or staff. And you have to bear with me, I'm new at this, so I don't know really what I'm doing right now. So.
Very good. Well, thank you. That's a good list. I'm appreciated hearing about the previous years, 2022. It seems like only yesterday. Anyhow, but
or at least last week.
Yeah, at least last week. That's right. The projects and accomplishments the commission's worked on there as well. So that was very helpful. Let's see, council, any questions? And Councilmember Belisi, would you like to start us off? Oh, certainly, yes.
Well, thank you, Amy, for your report and for all the work that you and your committee do. It's very much appreciated. I am hoping that when you do your engagement for both the CIRC Park and the Creekside Parks master plans, that you look at how the Park Commission can work with a consultant to really engage our community in that process, and what kind of creative ideas you guys can come up with to get that engagement started. I know after 2 years of shutdown, we've had our citizens disengage, and they weren't highly engaged before then because there weren't any real prevailing issues that brought the community together. But I think with the inclusive playground coming up and all, this is an ideal time for that sort of engagement. One thing I noticed is you're going to be looking at park maintenance staffing. Now, that is a budgetary issue that we on the council will have to look at. During that discussion, I'd like you to maybe prompt your commission members to think of some other ways that maybe the citizens can help in volunteering efforts to maintain parks, maybe have HOAs adopt a park, or apartment complexes or businesses or something whereby, you know, if nothing else, on a monthly basis, somebody can go in and help clean up as a civic duty or responsibility, as a way to get our citizens to understand the time and effort that our parks maintenance crew puts into those parks, and how maybe our citizens can help in easing that time by cleaning up after themselves.
Yeah, right.
So, you know, think of some creative ways outside the box that don't necessarily require city funding to maybe get them done, and how we can get our citizens more engaged with utilizing our parks.
Yeah.
But thank you. I look forward to hearing your events and activities this next year.
Thank you, Councilmember Belisi. Councilmember Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Amy, also, thank you very much for your presentation. For someone who hasn't done it before, you did a great job.
Thanks.
So thank you. Or someone who doesn't know what they're doing.
Yeah, I didn't know
You
what I was
fooled us
doing,
all.
so.
You know, one of the things I heard throughout the presentation is this focus on programs, especially more for the youth focus going into 2023. Where's the commission on programs for seniors? We've got an aging population. You know, they use the parks too, at least we hope they will and do. If we're looking to be an all-inclusive, that would not just be kids, it would be seniors and families
right,
and
yeah.
individuals. So,
I think a lot of seniors go to Furcrest and use the community center there because they can play ping pong and they can use that facility, so.
but is that part on the Parks Commission's radar about how we're including
include
all the
seniors?
citizens? Well, all the citizens
Yeah.
really in our community.
Yep. Yeah, not just
What are,
youth,
what are
right.
some of the thoughts that they're giving to that?
Really, a lot of people were wanting pickleball courts, so that would be all ages. We can probably look into that more on, what other options would be for all ages, not just youth.
I would be very interested in hearing
Yeah.
in a broader sense of what we're doing for the whole community. But thank you for what you've got here.
Yeah.
All right, very good. And, excuse me, that would be Councilmember Keel, followed by Councilmember McCluskey.
Thank you, Mayor. Amy, thank you for your report. I think you did a great job, too.
Thanks.
I just want to say I really I want to agree wholeheartedly with what Councilmember Belisi was talking about as far as working with the citizens and getting them involved. I think that's a great opportunity to spread the wealth and the interest and begin to build that synergy around our parks. The other thing is I think our parks are probably one of the biggest strengths that we have within our city. We know that we don't have enough parks given the ratio and the numbers, but the parks that we do have, I think the clientele, the citizens that we have, and the families that we have, they really, I know a long time, they really want to leverage those parks, right? For the times that I spent, the 10 years I spent on the school board, we couldn't keep families out of the buildings, the gyms and the parks and playgrounds. And I think the same thing is for our city's facilities. And so I just want to encourage the commission to continue to look at how we can leverage our parks. An example is that with Homestead, just right here next door, we're redoing that. I mean, there's more walking space, and we're doing stuff with the roadies, and we've got other kinds of things. And then I think at one point in time, we had some conversation about all of the parks where we're going to have different themes on the parks, where people could interact with certain things. And I don't know if I'm tracking, if you guys are tracking with me right now, but there were people could just kind of walk from one park to the other, like through the city, and then in each park would be some kind of activity that wasn't at the other park that they can get into. I mean, when I heard all that, I mean, that's good stuff, and I'm just wondering if is the commission involved in that, or are you thinking about that? I mean,
yeah.
you didn't mention that here.
Yes, yeah, well, that's mostly, Kobayashi will want to try to connect that to, is it Leech Creek or? Yeah, yeah, that can be connected all the way up pretty far. Most of the other parks, I think, are more isolated. It would be nice to have more park, be able to buy more park property. And I think there was a homeowner that had some property, but they wanted to sell it for like $1 million or something, you know. And there's a nice green patch down by Lefty's on 27th. It's not very big, but it would make a nice little park. But I don't know if the owner, you know, what they would want to do. But yeah, connecting the parks is really important. So and especially connecting Adriana Hess to Paradise Pond. That's will be a really nice opportunity to connect those two, and hopefully that will happen.
Exactly right. So
yeah.
that's kind of where my head is.
Yeah.
The connecting and looking out to the future. How can we make it better? You know,
Yeah.
what's going to really attract people and get them excited about what
Right,
we're doing.
right.
I mean, what we have here is great. I mean, an inclusive park. I'm all over that.
Yeah,
I have
and that will
family members
be,
that could.
and I think Chris Saunders was saying that would make UP very unique, or the only inclusive in the county, or I'm not sure if it's the county or the state. So
Western Washington.
yeah, or West. Yeah, so that'd be a good branding opportunity, also. You know.
Exactly.
But I think also as we're developing more, you know, it's nice to have developers that want to add park space in their developments too, because there's a developer by Adriana Hess, but he is going to do a little connection to the trail at Adriana Hess. So that I think that's important, that we get developers that want to keep our trees and, you know, develop more park space too.
Yeah. So that's my encouragement to the
Yeah,
commission, is to think along those lines and begin to build out and be forward-looking and
Yeah.
futuristic and
Yep.
stuff.
Yeah, we're always thinking about that. Yeah. Yeah.
Super. Thank you.
So,
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember McCluskey, followed by Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, and thank you for your report. I'm very passionate about our city parks. I think they're our crowning jewels in our city, and I'm excited that some of the undeveloped parks are on your radar too, to get them so that they're functional and people can go out and enjoy them. One of the things that could easily highlight some of our parks is to do events at parks that are developed out. And also encourage people to go out and use the trails. And I know we have a booklet that has all of our parks and pathways to our parks, because our sidewalks lead to trails throughout all of our city and all of our city parks. Also use the strategic partners, for example, to house some of our events, like Adriana has Audubon there.
That
And
has
so
what?
Has the Audubon Society.
Oh, right.
And so they might be a strategic partner to go and do bird walks through Kobayashi, Paradise, and out in through there on an occasion. So look for those sort of partnerships to synergize, as well as our senior center, to start re-engaging our seniors and providing not only passive but active activities through our senior center that we have there in 27th and Grandview.
Right,
Because
right.
there are seniors there that are mobile, and they're looking for, you know, casual exercise opportunities and socialization.
Yeah, that's something we can look into.
And that goes in essence, looking at our existing infrastructure that we have within our city, school districts, and think about our active recreation and popping up some pilot youth programs
Right.
through the other organizations that we may happen to partner with.
Yeah.
And the other piece is the number 4, the long-term sustainable staffing plan. I'm all on board with that one. And I know Mr. Eklund did an extensive, detailed report last year. And we were hoping to get get at least another staff member or two for Public Works and Parks in the budget, but that didn't happen, unfortunately. You know, our public safety with our police
Right.
is our prioritization. So if you have any great ideas on how to do that budgetary-wise, I'll be all ears for that. But I'm glad it's on your radar. I don't know how much work that could come out of it, unless you have the funding to actually go forth and to do that.
Right.
Ms. Reckland, did you present your report to the Park Advisory Commission? The staff report that you gave to the council? Because I think that would be very strategic in the number 4 and where we're at in that place.
We did the highlights of it. We didn't have the full PowerPoint, I think, at the time. I think we did the original one that Gary did and then did the kind of gave them an update of the one we did. But we certainly could kind of revisit that too, to especially probably, I know that we're going to be having some discussions in the upcoming council retreat, and so that would be a good opportunity to update, Park Commission of the findings from that too, or the direction there.
Right, yeah, to keep them on board with the progress on that one. All right, then that's all my comments, and thank you.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa, and then Councilmember Wood.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to piggyback on Councilmember Belisi's comments and specifically highlight the funding, how the citizens can, and I think not so much put it on the citizens as it is maybe having it laid out clearly, the cost analysis for any one of these particular improvements, and then seeing where the grant cycle is to be able to handle that, or the capital dollars will be coming in. There's got to be some forecasts based on development and permits, what kind of monies will come in, and as you do anyway in the capital projects. But I think that as you do this, I think that, as we all know, is through our park fees that pay for the capital projects, as well as grants, and some from the city pockets or utilizing staff time and other things to augment what the grants may give us. So I think that has to be laid out really clearly. And then if you do, if the consultant or the planning, and this goes for the staff as well as the Parks Commission, is asking, well, can this be budgeted? I think the first task will be is where will the citizens feel they will be willing to pay extra in taxes or some other means. I think that that's where you have to lay out the hard question: how do you want to pay for this? And,
Right.
But other than the grants and the capital and the park fees.
Right,
Okay.
right.
But I think that has to be really clearly laid out in plain English so people can really understand, because everybody wants more improvements, better improvements, more parks. And talking about more parks, we do have undeveloped parks. And if you suggest, well, we could use this piece of land, tell me first why you can't use the land that is undeveloped. Okay, so anyway, thank you.
Right, okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and Councilmember Wood. Your mic's on.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Amy. You may notice a trend from our comments up here where we're talking about creativity and working within our budget, which really isn't much for this. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about number 5, promote youth sports and recreation. Obviously, I'm a big fan of that. But when I ask, as you work on that project, come up with tiered options, for lack of a better term. Options that can be done with very little expense and options that may require a little bit extra, and tier it up, because I think there is, well, certainly I support the idea of doing something there, though I'm not sure what we can feasibly support right now. But if you can give us, I noticed you mentioned partnering with Furcrest, that's been mentioned before. Anything like that again, creative, to quote
Yeah.
Councilmember Belisi. What other, just, if you could give us different options that the council could look at supporting, and then we can, throw that against the budget and see what can actually be supported.
Okay,
That'd be
right.
wonderful.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Okay, yep.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember Wood. And let's see, and I have a few comments from my perspective as well. Amy, first off, thank you for the good work, and for your commission members, and the support of Todd and Jack is valued as well. It's a good, strong list for us here. As I look at it, one of the things I'm looking for is how it aligns with our council-adopted goals, and a number of these items do align well. And some align to some second-tier goals. And so I'm trying to weigh those things out. There's a couple of comments related to that. One is on item number 2, it's about the community center and taking a look at, is the community center, what's our space needs, and a variety of things. So, council members, I'm from a place where the model of a community center included within that a senior center. Only it wasn't a senior center, it was just one of the many activities that took place in the community center. So I mention that because it doesn't necessarily need to be a standalone, it might be integrated into another space. The park master plan and seeing how the community center integrates into that, this was an issue for us about a year ago, as there was some interest in, where do we go? Is that still viable? Do we protect this area within Cirque Park that we've identified a footprint there? Was that the right footprint? What can we do with that? And so as it relates to that, that's good. That's helpful for us, and it can help move that project forward.
Right.
That and the youth sports, though, are things that I want to be a bit careful about. I want to be careful because I don't want to set expectations that are not realistic for us within the near term. Doing master plans are a very good opportunity to do those on the front end and far ahead. And so we have a chance to focus on what matters and then get on with them. But I don't want to set a tone that says, oh, in 2 years we're going to build a community center. Even if we could build that community center, unless we have an external partner that I'm unaware of, which is very likely, I hope there is such a person or such a thing, it's unlikely we could staff a community center.
Right,
So
right.
I just want to, dampen I just want to get the expectations set there. And if council, if we don't want to run down that road, then this is a chance, or near term, before we adopt the resolution, there's an opportunity for us to figure out if we want to put energy into that at this time. Somewhat similarly in youth sports. Youth sports, I think, was tied for number 5 on a list that's typically 3 of where we are in our council goals. By the way, I think I remember who made the motion to put youth sports on. Oh, it was me. But I don't want to, regardless of who made the motion, it's in that hierarchy. And I know we're trying to work through that hierarchy, and we're going to spend time on that in a retreat coming up in a couple of weeks. So, again, I just don't want to get too much expectation that there's sudden change and monumental change until there is some real opportunity for that.
Right.
However, what you discussed with what you mentioned is one example for Crest, and there's other partners out there as well. Those are the things that, maybe there's a way to spark something that could happen. In those
Yeah, it's
range.
more of a hybrid, I think,
Yeah.
program.
And appreciate hearing about those things. So, but thank you for putting the work plans together. Sorry, I wanted to bring in a little bit of wet blanket on some of it. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't necessarily go forward with them, but I do want us to focus on the things that are near our agenda as well. Okay, any other comments on this one? Councilmember Mulkowski. Oh, excuse me. I've got to get off of
I'm
my
not ready.
role
There
as
you go. Right, thank
contributing
you.
commenter and push the button. Okay.
Yeah, in light of the mayor's comments, I'm reflecting because that's our discussion that the council had, which was what you reflected. Maybe we should be a little more detailed in this request going forward to the Parks Commission, because we are interested in understanding what would that footprint look like for the community center, and some of the multifunctional facets that this community center may entail. And in regards to the youth recreation, what we had, we haven't really fully vetted the vision out, but for the intention was. And like I had mentioned in my previous comments, the existing established organizations that we can maybe now leverage organically in the immediate future, but not have a fully organized rec program where
right.
we staff and fund it.
Yeah.
So maybe a little more detailed parameters if you need that from the council, so that the discussions don't go outside of the scope of the
Yeah, that would be
council's
good.
intention for those two items.
Yeah, that would be good.
Okay, thanks.
Well, with staff's, thank you, Councilmember Lukuski, appreciate that. And actually, we could perhaps, as we're preparing, the staff is helping us prepare the resolution that authorizes the work plans. We can add a little more detail, as you point out, at that point, to give them help them focus their energy, if that sounds appropriate. Okay, good. Anything else before we move to our last work plan for this evening? Okay. Amy, again, thank you.
Great,
and
thank
good
you.
job and good plan. We look forward to a productive year with your help. So thank you. And let's invite up our Planning Commission. And
Not going to be solo.
I love that you better not
Rally the
leave me up
troops
here by
early.
that's great. Well, welcome. Thank you for coming in and,
Good evening.
being available for us. Appreciate that, Cindy.
Yeah. So Sandy McKenzie, Vice Chair of the Planning Commission.
All right, and Sandy, if you wouldn't mind, those
Oh,
mics.
am I
yeah,
not close
up
enough?
close
Sorry.
is kind of what it takes
Extend my
for
arms here.
people with
I'm just
hearing
gonna
like
take my
me.
glasses off so I can actually read this. So we have a busy year ahead because the comprehensive plan is on there. So that will be keeping us very, very busy. But the first item on our plan is code cleanup. And that's something that we started working on, been working on it for at least the last year and a half, I think. And it's just things that have come up due to like the form-based code adoption, and then we're finding things that don't align. And so we're getting those cleaned up and anticipating that that's not going to take the whole year, but we'll continue to take steps to get that completed. The Northeast Business District Plan, the Planning Commission began its development of the plan in 2021, and OTAC was hired in 2022 to help develop that plan. And they were the ones that actually helped us with the Regional Growth Center sub-area plan. So it's nice that we've got some continuity there. I think that'll be helpful. There is an advisory group that was formed. I think they've got 2 more meetings, we said. And then they will be presenting to the Planning Commission we're thinking the March meeting. And so we'll have some more information about that. And Commissioner Peters is the Planning Commission representative on that advisory group. And then the 27th Street Business District Plan, again, started as part of the Regional Growth Center Plan. And the district plan will establish a cohesive vision for the future of the district, along with goals, policies, and identified actions and projects needed to implement the plan. As stated in the RGC plan, the development opportunity should fit the scale of the district with generally smaller parcel sizes, and will likely include some missing middle housing types, which would be some low-rise, which would be 3 to 4 story apartments, and then serving retail and employment. And just kind of to piggyback on what was said during EDAC presentation and what Councilmember McCluskey said about kind of getting the pulse of that particular part of the community. I think we did that during the Regional Growth Center planning. And maybe that's something that we could pull that back up and find what we talked about before. And I mean, that was like 6 years ago, right? So probably needs to be a little updated, and things have changed there, but it might be a good jumping off point to go back and take a look at that. Right, yeah. Yeah. And then the final big one on here is the comprehensive plan update. And the Planning Commission is going to begin working on a major update of the University Place Comprehensive Plan. The city is required to conduct a periodic review of the comp plan and update it if necessary. This update must be completed by the end of 2024. The city has contracted with LDC Inc. for consulting services to update a portion of the plan. The city is also partnering with the South Sound Housing Affordability Partners to hire a consultant that will provide the city with a racial equity analysis of the comp plan and development regulations, as well as recommendations to allow additional missing middle housing options.
All right, very good. It sounds like a busy year.
It will be very busy.
As they all have been for quite some time. You folks have been working very hard. But when I take a look around our community, I think about how the Planning Commission has really helped kind of shape that. It's a joint effort by council, by Planning Commission, by city staff, and by the market and community itself. But I see the outcome of that going. This is speaking about University Place. This is one of the ways that we are visually defining who we are. And anyhow, so appreciate the Commission's good work to get that done. But Councilmember Fleming.
Thank you, Mr.
Councilmember
Mayor.
Keel, and then Councilmember Wood.
Sandy, great report. It really summarizes a lot of moving parts, in the city and a lot what the commission's doing. And you got my wheels spinning up here when you were talking about like the Northeast District, the 27th District, Town Center, I'm going to presume is in there somewhere. And we've got, some development going on, or it's already done down in the south part, down like Fred Meyer in that area. But we've got new development with a potential hotel and other things going on out at Chambers Bay. How does the commission see all that integrating into the overall business of the city and planning?
Mr. Brisky.
So your thoughts on it first?
Yeah.
Do I have thoughts on it?
I just don't see
have
them being
lots of-
isolated out there, so.
I don't know that we have discussed how that would be integrated into other plans. It's been a lot of the discussion and I came on the commission after a lot of the work had already been done on that. And so a lot of the discussion that we've had has surrounded basically, is it going to get done, number one? Citizen impact, there's a lot of chatter always about, the impact that it's going to have on that area. I don't know that we as a commission have really discussed how to integrate that development with other development going on in the community. I could be wrong. Correct me if I am, please, sir.
It was probably just a little before your time on
Probably.
the commission. But yes, I mean, during various comprehensive plan updates, obviously there was work done with the Chambers Creek properties. We have a Chambers Creek property master plan that was, adopted and then implemented within our existing comp plan. And so during this next comp plan update cycle that we have over the next 2 years, we'll be required to kind of look at that as well and make sure it's aligning with what's occurring out there and the existing comp plan policies that we currently have in place.
I appreciate that, Kevin. I know in all the conversations we had last year and all the things we talked about in terms of codes and planning and all that, we talked a lot about various areas of the city. That was kind of the quiet area. We didn't talk a lot about that, but it would be interesting to see, from the city's perspective, how do we see that integrating? Because one way or another, it may or may not happen, but right now it's on the may happen side versus the may not. So it's something that we shouldn't let slip off our radar screen.
Thank you, Councilmember Fleming. And then going to Councilmember Keel, followed by Wood, followed by McCluskey, followed by Belisi.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your report. It's very exciting to hear all of the things that are going on, and you certainly have been part of those conversations over the years, but to actually see it continuing and getting it done. And when you drive down Mildred and you drive around the city, you see all the stuff that's popping out of the ground. At least for me, it gets very, very exciting. And so I'm excited about the plan that you have. The question I had is around the Northeast Business District, and I'm thinking that's the property up around Mildred where the old bowling alley, all that stuff was. So there's been another effort that we call Four Corners, right? And I'm just curious, is that work the Four Corners group has been doing that started, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, and we've been, David's been working it with the different cities and stuff like that, and Pierce Transit's involved, Sound Transit's involved. I mean, there's just a lot of this Tacoma Housing, Faircrest. I mean, everything is coming, and that's a part of that business district. So how are those conversations going, and is the House Commission positioning themselves to work with all of the other entities around that area?
Let Kevin.
Okay.
I don't know, that's a staff thing.
That level hasn't quite got to the planning commission yet.
Oh.
Since we're currently at the advisory commission state, which does have a planning commissioner representative on that, and then local businesses and local property owners in that area. And so that's the project. OTAC is leading that up with staff help. And so when we're talking with OTAC, we're giving them, the information about the Four Corners as well to make sure it will be within that Northeast Business District plan. So that will be coming to the Planning Commission, for their, review and recommendation. It hasn't quite gotten there yet until we get the initial draft.
Okay. I mean, good it's coming to them. I just don't want anyone to get surprised or, well, we're thinking here, and then something else comes from over here, and then it's like, what's going on?
The commission has definitely heard about the Four Corners plan and are privy to, we've had conversations. And so we know what the general plan is for that area. So it's not going to be new to those of us who've
Good.
been around for at least the last, I think, 18 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, good. That was my concern. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Wood.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Sonny. So I got a question. You mentioned it
Just
twice.
a moment, I have to get your mic on, sorry. Didn't realize it wasn't. You're on.
Thank you. So thank you, Sandy. You mentioned it twice in here. You talk about missing middle housing. And obviously, that is something, I think that's important to a lot of us up here, figuring something out with that. At the same time, it is also apparently important statewide, and the state legislature is looking at missing middle housing and legislating things at their level as well, and that's going to continue this coming session. And so, unfortunately, I don't think we have the time to get much from you that we could use to work with the state on this, but what I would ask you to do is, as the state starts throwing things out there for either legislation that may or may not be closing, if you observe that and specifically observe conflicts with either our existing or proposed comprehensive plans or business district plans, if that could be alerted to either staff or ourselves so that we can take action as we need. We're in favor of missing middle housing. We just really want to maintain local control over the process.
Right.
So.
And my day job is as a real estate agent, and I'm on the realtor, very active with the Realtor Association and on the Government Affairs Committee with realtors. And so we're very involved in all of that. And so if there are conversations that you want to have outside of this about what's going on, I can definitely update you, because that's something that we're definitely tracking and having conversations with our representatives about. So, yeah, that will definitely, it'll be on my radar, and I try to keep the Planning Commission apprised of things as they happen.
Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councilmember. All right, and then Councilmember McCluskey.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for all your work and also being available and willing to report to our council. One of the 27th Business District and the comprehensive plan updates, something that will tie, my comments are privy to both of these, to also look in health and all policies as you go through and look at that, and also the Growth Management Act. There's a whole other, as you know, health section to that, health, livability, lifestyle. And so I'm very keen on incorporating that into our policies, and also when the Planning Commission discusses and makes recommendations back to council, have some of that verbiage that you've looked at that, and whatever health index you may want to, adhere to, just so that I'm aware that we are looking at a healthy, livable lifestyle going forward as we plan the infrastructure, because this structure will provide the function towards a healthier lifestyle approach for that. The other aspect of that includes pretty much all of this is the affordable housing concept, and also how to encourage developers not only to, well, we're building apartments, but they're not affordable, how to build the affordable housing, but also in the missing middle, how do we also get housing so that the citizens can also gain equity? And there's several different strategies and approaches you can do. At SHAPE, there was been several meetings where different subject matter experts came and did presentations in regards to some of these things that we could, hopefully incorporate to encourage that with these different agencies. A couple of them were nonprofits, and so they'll come in and provide funding as well. But it also will give you an idea on how to strategize and maybe incentivize some of these approaches, and also some of the cottage style. We tried to do a pilot project many years ago, and this Councilmember Belisi and I were on the Planning Commission, and it didn't go. So I would like to know why, and maybe we can start working on that again, because I thought it was a really cool concept where the collective community and the small cottage houses, and they shared a community space. It was successful in other different cities that I went into some of the breakout sessions, and so I was just wondering, how can we make it work within a City of University Place? Okay, so thanks.
All right, Councilman Kleski, thank you. Well, I'm going to take this opportunity to make a couple of comments and follow on Councilman McCluskey's comments about affordable housing and such. Of course, this last year, you as the Planning Commission worked hard on the Housing Action Toolkit, and we, Council, are about to pick up those items and work on some of the things such as SEPA thresholds, short plat thresholds, a variety of different things with the recommendations you've made. Those are all good ministerial changes that we can make, which will help smooth the process out if the community and the council chooses. So those are in front of us, but I was curious, are there more things in the Housing Action Toolkit that the Planning Commission, we tended to focus on what at the time we were referring to as low-hanging fruit, which are there other subjects coming from 2 years ago, the Housing Action Toolkit, that we want to pick up and discuss? Has the Commission looked at that recently? Anybody know?
We have, well, the recommendations you're going to get are, we talked a lot about ADUs, spent a lot of time on that, because that really is probably the lowest hanging fruit that there is. That's probably the easiest way that we can create more housing units without drastically increasing density. The Housing Action Toolkit is something that we're going to continue to look at. There are other aspects of it, but we really focused on the ADU portion of it and the short plats and those things, because they were the easier things to tackle. We will be revisiting that.
All right, I just don't see that on the work plan. So that's
And it
what
probably
prompted-
was just an oversight, and because I know that it's it's in the plan.
It's somewhat the way that at least some of the items in there we felt would be integrated with the comprehensive plan update, like changes to a possible zone or would be a comprehensive plan designation, and would take more time and analysis, so it'd be better done under the comp plan update cycle. So essentially, some of those other items in the Housing Action Toolkit, while not listed specifically under the comp plan update, they will be reviewed as part of the comp plan update.
All right, great, good. Well, thank you. So that's sort of a subcategory for us there. Good. Well, beyond that, from my own perspective, this looks like a good, valuable set of work components. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So now that I've
Why don't we just keep going?
yeah, I might as well. But Councilmember Belisi, thank you for your understanding, and wanted, if you would like to get your comments that I jumped in front of you on.
I will end this session. Sandy, I want to thank you so much for your presentation and all your hard work on the Planning Commission. Having been a member on the Planning Commission for 16 years, I know what it's like to read all the regulations, try and make sure that all the T's are crossed, I's are dotted, you cross-check everything, and yet things slip through the cracks. But I can tell you, after listening to the news tonight and Governor Inslee's announcement to the legislative session coming up, we are going to be facing some issues with our housing allocations and regulations. And I know it's going to be a difficult task for staff as well as the Planning Commission to keep on top of it and make sure that our regulations are intact and that you will alert us for our action if needed to go and protest to the legislation, because I get the distinct feeling that these are going to be regulations that we won't have much of a say in, that will dramatically impact what all the work we have done on our comprehensive plan, on our housing action plan, on our sub-area plan, all this time and money and energy that we have spent to give our developers and our citizens an idea of what the future looks like will be going down the toilet shortly if we don't keep up on it. So you guys have a lot of work to do this next year. I wish you lots of luck on it, and please do keep us informed, and using your real estate connections to keep the Planning Commission updated and staff updated is extremely helpful. Because again, these regulations take time to develop, and oftentimes you forget that there's an elephant in the room that is going to be, sitting on everybody momentarily. And so it is your commission above all has a heavy caseload here this upcoming year to ensure that University Place maintains what we have developed over the last 27 years and that our citizens have come to expect. So thank you again for all your hard work.
And thank you for your comments there, too. So, all right. With that, I think we may be ready to move on to our next subject. But again, appreciate your work and the Commission's good work, and we'll be able to move our work plans forward with an upcoming resolution shortly. And just to summarize, I think where we are is all the work plans look acceptable. There were a couple of details to be filled out on park, on a couple of subpoints there, but just to help us with our focus. At least that was my take on it, and I think we'll move on from there. Great. Again, thank you. Thank you for spending your night there with us here. We do have one other item on our agenda, and we're now going to get a chance to talk about ARPA funds and use as employee retention incentives. And let's see. And Ms. Petorick will get us started, it looks like.
Good evening, Council and Mayor Pro Tem. Lisa Petorick, Administrative Services Department. Please let me know if you need me to speak up. Sometimes my voice will end up being quiet, so it won't hurt my feelings if you ask me to speak up. So, one of the topics that we're going to be talking about is the idea of using ARPA funds potentially as a staff retention incentive. And you may recall that this conversation came up during union negotiations last year. We ended up completing that contract, and we finished those conversations, and we never completely closed the conversation on using ARPA funds as retention, and so that's why staff is bringing this back, just to seek direction from council on if this is something that you are interested in having staff pursue, and potentially bring back a resolution for your consideration. So tonight I'm going to be covering two main ideas. The first part of the discussion will be specifically related to the rules that were clarified by the Department of Treasury last spring. And then the second is just a description of how the incentive program may look if implemented solely for the 2023 and 2024 years. So in the spring of 2022, the Department of Treasury clarified rules surrounding what ARPA funds could be used for. And one of those clarifications was whether those funds can be used to retain employees in the form of a retention incentive. And the short answer to that is yes. So long as that retention can meet 4 elements required by the Department of Treasury. So in order to use ARPA funds in such a manner, the government must show that 1, employees were likely to leave employment in the absence of the bonus. 2, retention incentives may be necessary based on the presence of alternatives offered. 3, the retention must not exceed traditional offers by the employer or competing offers of another employer. And 4th and lastly, the incentive must be less than 25% of the rate of pay or 10% for a group if all the other elements are met. So those are the 4 rules that were clarified by the Department of Treasury. The retention proposal itself is simple and straightforward. If council were to move forward with a retention incentive, it would be recommended that such an incentive would only be offered for the years 2023 and 2024. Since it would be expended through ARPA, there would be no financial expectation that it lasts beyond the biennium, as ARPA funds need to be obligated by the end of 2024, although they can be spent through 2026. It would also align with the current biennial budget. The proposal would be to provide $500 per year to employees who work the entire year. This amount would be prorated for part-time employees. The incentive would be paid on the last paycheck in December. And if an employee happened to be hired anytime during the biennium, that amount would be prorated. So for example, if someone were hired July 1st, instead of receiving $500 at the end of 2023, they receive half of that since they worked half of the year. And then if they continued employment on through 2024, then they would be eligible for the full $500 incentive for 2024. I would like to note that employees who might be on a disciplinary performance improvement plan would not be eligible for such a retention. And an item such as this, because it involves salary, would have to be bargained separately with the union. And so we would handle that as a separate contract amendment. So that's the proposal itself. Again, fairly straightforward, fairly simple. The part of the discussion really entails around the 4 elements required by the Department of Treasury. Does the city meet those 4 elements? For 3 of those, I think we can definitively and easily say yes, because the last element that we talked about was the threshold of the dollar amount. It couldn't exceed 25%. Well, $500 is well below that, and so we meet that requirement. I think the hardest element of those 4 that we discussed is probably the first one, right? And that's the one that relates back to the likelihood of employees leaving should an incentive not be provided, right? It's hard to say and say yes or no definitively that employees would leave. I think what we do at the city is we do our best to provide a competitive environment, right, to make the city an attractive place to work. Annually, we do a market salary analysis. So we, on an annual basis, look at our salaries and see how they compare to our comparable cities. We use those that are most like us in the Puget Sound area. We regularly look at our benefits package to see how we measure up there, and we are competitive with our benefits package. We look at things like medical, dental, vision, also included with that our leave balances. Are we providing roughly the approximate same types of leave accruals as other agencies. Other things that are considerations are, especially coming out of the pandemic, flexible work options. Some positions we can provide that, others we can't. But we again look to our neighbors and see what they're able to provide, because we're a small city. We are all competing for the same pool of applicants with our neighboring cities, so it's important that we're competitive in that manner. I can say that during the pandemic, we did experience a more difficult time in recruiting staff. We were not the only entity facing that issue. There were others. That's where the term Great Resignation was coined from, because a lot of agencies, both public and private, experienced that during the pandemic, and we were not immune to that. The pandemic probably did weigh heavily in the minds of folks who were maybe on the border of retiring. Some folks might have made the decision to retire earlier based on their experiences during the pandemic. I can say anecdotally, we did have one staff member leave during the pandemic who was not of retirement age. Part of the lure was a hiring benefits program that was an incentive for them and included a sizable hiring bonus. But that was one individual. For the term of the pandemic, I think we were able to meet employees' needs, and so we didn't lose anyone sort of outside of maybe those folks that were sort of on the retirement bubble to begin with. In terms of, the remaining elements, we can show that retention incentives and benefits are becoming more prevalent. You probably have been hearing on the radio, seeing retention benefits provided with the public sector. We're seeing more of that in the public sector. You probably have heard on the news, the state is offering a $1,000 bonus, retention bonus for those that remain employed through July 1st of this year. Other cities, smaller cities, have mostly used ARPA funds for public safety employees, but we are starting to hear about some entities that are using ARPA funds as a retention for their non-law enforcement employees. And I think I cited DuPont as an example in the memo. They are using ARPA funds to provide a retention for their non-law enforcement staff. Depending on the type of position that they have, they're eligible for a $5,000 or $7,000 incentive. But with that comes a longer time frame. They're requiring their employees to sign a 3-year contract to stay. So I think, we're seeing more of that. So it's always a consideration. And then, of course, with the third and the fourth elements, we can say with the straight face, yes, Department of Treasury, we do meet those. In terms of, offering a retention incentive for the amount of $500 per year, it's akin to some of the other benefits we offer. So clothing allowances, for example, would be one. Merits that are provided for staff, merit days that are provided for staff would be another incentive that we could liken that to. So just as a quick recap, again, there are 4 elements of consideration that the Department of Treasury looks at. If we can meet those 4 elements, then a government can use ARPA funds for a retention incentive. And then I briefly described the very straightforward retention benefit of $500 per year for employees, only for the 2023 and 2024 year. So again, staff is looking for some council guidance on if this is something that council would like to pursue. And if so, then we could draft a resolution for your consideration. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions that you may have.
All right, very good. Well, thank you, Lisa. I appreciate that. Let me just ask a quick factual question. What is the spend-by date for ARPA itself? When do the funds need to be exhausted?
They have to be committed by December 31st of 2024, expended by December 31st, 2026.
Okay, thank you. All right, and Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa had asked to speak. Councilmember Fleming is next. Councilmember Wood, Councilmember Keel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Patoric, thank you for that report. It was clear, concise, and very thorough, and I do appreciate that. You touched on all the important points. The key element that you mentioned, number one, by the way, council members, I do strongly support moving forward with this. I always have been a supporter of this from the beginning. I think that we're a very small city in the regards when it comes to staffing. We're still not staffed like a 35,000 population city should be in many ways. So we have departments that are very small staff. You lose one, that's a significant number, especially when we most likely will be a senior staff that's being around. They're the ones that are going to be picked off. Because most likely they're the ones that are going to be given incentives to move. So $500 is actually not a lot of money but it is I think part of the equation when you tell an employee that likes the city, likes the other staff, likes hopefully this council, and but it's part of the equation that it's not just about money. It's a gesture of money is one, but the other one is that money represents many things. One is that we value that employee. People can give money, but they may not be valued. And so I believe that it provides value, a value point for that, not in monetarily, but that we value their expertise, we value who they are, how they contribute, etc. I think that also represents that we are always thinking about our employees. Sometimes that means a lot. It's just like you've heard the phrase of, it's just a thank you. A pat on the back saying thank you goes a long way for someone to do even more. And I think that this does do that. It's all in the same basket of appreciation. I really think that for the small amount, it really can be leveraged in so many different ways that we tell the employees that we're always thinking and being creative within our means, but we don't just say, well, we don't have the money or we have other priorities, and so this is not the time. We all know in government, it's never the right time to do more, especially when it comes to employees' salaries, benefits, or even the council's pay. It's never a good time. There's always a reason why not. I think that we need to change that attitude, and I think we have a certain, through our approval on health benefits, on how we continue those and not reduce them. I think we've done that, and also in the ways we've, with the CPIs and the salary increases and inflationary increases, I think that we've done that really well. And I think all that has contributed to, and a good place to work, has contributed to a lot of staff staying for a very long time. And I think we need to keep it that way. As you know, we just mentioned earlier, we're talking about the commissions, whether it be public safety, planning, parks. It's all very complicated on how you deal with the public, how we deal with the assets that we're given. And it takes experience to really have a staff that has the experience and the background to provide us as council in depth with the reports and advise on how to make policy decisions. And I certainly want to keep our senior staff and those that are just beginning, because as we know, there are staff that are retiring age, and 5-10 years from now, we need to bring up new staff that will take those places. So with that, I strongly recommend we move forward with this. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And Councilmember Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Lisa, for your presentation. I just got some questions, just trying to get things clarified in my head. Since we're talking retention, what is our current turnover rate in the city over the last 1, 3, and 5 years?
I don't have the exact statistic with me to provide an exact number. I can say it has been relatively low, aside from probably this last year where we have started to see more of our senior staff retiring. So I think it's picked up. I mean, I know it has picked up in the past year, and we will be seeing more retirements in this next year. 5 years ago, I would say relatively low.
So the turnover rate's driven by retirement and not people leaving because there's other jobs?
For the
right
most
now.
recently, yes.
Yeah. So I think where I struggle with the proposal, and I'm certainly not against, as the Mayor Pro Tem points out, we certainly need to figure out ways to recognize employees and show how much we value them, because truly none of us could do our job without them, none of us. I'm just not sure about using one-time funding for potential ongoing programs. That's a rule that I've never broken. And if we're looking at retaining people, I would think that if we spent that money now for our retention, it's not going to keep those that are going to retire from retiring, number one. Number two, there would be an expectation somewhere down the road that if we used money to retain a group that really wasn't going to be influenced one way or another, how are we going to influence those down the road who really could vote with their feet, because it'll be a younger population, a cohort of employees that we're going to be looking at. So I'm not sure we have really enough information to really jump on the bandwagon. But I would certainly be open to exploring ways in how we might, look at this funding to recognize the value of our employees. I'm not sure this is the best means of doing that. You did mention, the state is offering the $1,000 bonus, and that's true, because they lost a lot of employees who refused to vaccinate. And so they're trying to hang on to what's left of that population, especially in their public works, which really got impacted by that. So I kind of consider that an apples and orange comparison, but nonetheless, I think, if we're looking at how do we use ARPA funding to recognize the value of our employees, maybe we should look at other alternatives and do it that way, so we can use one-time funding for one-time recognitions, not one-time funding for ongoing programs. So that's what's in my head at the moment. So I'm not ready to move this forward, but certainly would love to learn more and explore more on how we can do that better.
Councilmember Fleming, thank you. And Councilmember Wood.
Thank you, Mayor. So I have really 3 comments, questions. First, you mentioned DuPont and then the state as well, which Councilmember Fleming mentioned may not be an apples-to-apples comparison. But I think if we're going to try and make a case for the first element, recognizing how the competitive environment is changing and potentially extrapolating how that could affect our employees going forward, because this isn't retroactive, as you pointed out. This is only for going forward. If the competitive environment with our fellow cities and public institutions in 2023 and 2024 is getting more competitive in terms of retention and recruitment incentives, then there would be, I think, a clear case we can make to prevent loss, if we can make that case based on what other people are doing as well. 2, since you mentioned DuPont here and the amount, I would ask the question, is 500 enough of an incentive to retain somebody who is thinking of leaving? And we may want to consider the actual dollar amount and how we want, if we want to do it, how we want to do it, but let's look at something that might actually be competitive, again, number 2. And then my third question is, one of the things you mentioned here is the number of applicants, and can this program be used for recruitment as well, specifically for a technical position that we're having a hard time hiring?
Yes, so the Department of Treasury does allow for hiring those hard-to-fill positions, because a lot of local jurisdictions did struggle with hiring folks through the pandemic. So the Department of Treasury has clarified that, yes, hiring and retention funds can be pulled from ARPA.
Okay. aside from the one you mentioned here, is there any other technical positions that we would be interested in hiring in the next year, or you anticipate hiring in the next year, that would benefit from a recruitment incentive for this?
There is another minimum of at least one that I can think of right off the top of my head that we will be looking for, potentially two in the first quarter of this year.
I'd be interested in just seeing, if not a plan, because we don't know who or when specifically and exactly, but if there's something you can bring to council that would support that, I'd be interested in seeing something on that as well.
Sure.
All right, thank you.
Okay, very good, Councilmember Wood. Excuse me, Councilmember Keel.
Thank you, Mayor. And Lisa, thank you for your report. Actually, Councilmember Wood asked, at the very end, asked the very question I want to start off with, and that is the hiring piece, right? You did mention that we had some difficulty because of the pandemic and all that stuff. And I know just on the other side of this door, back in the back, we've had turnover 2 or 3 times recently, at least 2 times, with the technician. And so I'm just wondering if there's if we could use this for hiring and say, hey, here's a 4-digit number, but we want you to stay 4 years, kind of a thing, like others have done. So that would be one of the things I'd like to explore as well. Going back to the proposal what you presented, I think this city is a great place to work. I think that's been evidenced by the longevity that people have stayed. It's a small city. It's a great city. We've got a great building. All you guys are great people to be around. I think people here like working here, and then all the other things you mentioned about the pay and the benefits and things like that. I mean, it's on par with everything else. So yes, I think it's a difficult question to answer. If people would leave without this, I think that's a very difficult question to answer. And then to Councilmember Fleming's point about, is this the best use of the funds, right? And I get wanting to honor people for the work that they've done. I'm on board with that 100%. We've got staff. I mean, they've been over backwards. I mean, we talked about all the weather-related stuff that we've done and people being away from their families and things like that. And so I'm not pushing that to the side at all. Out of the side of my mouth is they worked, but we paid them for it. And that's the agreement, right? And so what other things can we do to honor them and help them? I'm not so sure that the $500 or even the $1,000 over 2 years gets to the really the heart of the issue. Yes, we're giving money out, and I mean, if someone gives me $1,000, I'm not going to say no to that. No, okay, thank you very much. But is it something that really kind of changes my mind if I have something else in my mind? That's the question I have in my mind. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Keel. Councilmember Belisi.
Thank you, Mayor. Lisa, as I was reading this memo, and thank you for the very thorough memo, by the way, I was thinking about how I would take it. $500 a year for just a short 2-year period of time. If I'm on the fence about staying with the city, I don't think that's the enticement that keeps an employee in there, particularly when you have the city of DuPont offering $5,000 over a 3-year period, which is over $1,500 a year for the employee. If they're driven for incentives, they're driven for the wrong reasons to move. And then at the end of 3-year commitment, they get their $5,000 check. They're gone to the next person offering the next incentive, because I think incentives are going to be a wave of the future for businesses as well as government. We've put it out there. People have bought into it. It's going to be something that we need to budget. But I have a problem with this ARPA only being funded for 2 years, and then the expectation that we fund it ongoing will sit there with employees. I don't think $500 is sufficient. I mean, once you take taxes out of it, you're lucky if you're going to get 350 out of
Less
it.
than that.
And, you know, I mean, it is an extra dollar, but I don't know that it's enough to persuade somebody to stay. So I kind of think if we're going to do it, let's do like we did with the police. We offered them at $1,000. You know, we took some money and paid all our officers $1,000. Let's do it with our employees if we're going to go down that path. But I'm worried about what happens after 2024. The expectation is there. We don't have financing now, nor do we see financing in the future to continue that and to grow with it, but yet we're going to have the competition from other governmental entities, whether it be the state, whether it be our surrounding jurisdictions, that we need to look at this seriously. So I'm kind of torn and I'm on the fence about this. I think our employees have stuck with us through thick and thin. You know, the majority of our employees have been here in 2007 when we reduced our staffing, when they didn't get any COLA increases for 7 years. They stuck it out, and we're just now kind of catching up. You guys are still behind the 8 ball because of that short, and you've stuck with us. And I do think that there's some reward potential that needs to be given to those long-term employees to incentivize them, to let them know that we appreciate it. But I'm not sure if ARPA is the way to do it, because we can't continue that program after 2 years, not the way we currently have our budgets set up. And I think if we do it, we need to consider it a long-term project. Incentive bonus to get new employees on board, I do think we need to seriously look at that, because we are struggling and having difficulty in that arena, and new hires are going for the money. They are looking first at the salary. They're looking at the signing bonuses, you know, and that's what attracts them first when they go onto all these websites to look for jobs. And so I think our use of this funding might be better in that arena initially to get us over the hump, considering that we do have employees that are on the retirement cusp. I mean, we do have employees reaching 20, 25 years that are going to be seriously thinking about retirement, whether or not we offer an incentive here to them. And we need to be able to backfill those positions. I think that's where we should be focusing. But you guys can persuade me otherwise. I mean, I'm on the fence, literally.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Belisi. Councilmember McCluskey. Oh, all right, yes, that does help. Okay, wait a second. Let's see if I am there I am.
All right, thank you, Mayor. For the retention part of it, I'm not fully on board with that piece of it. 2 years for that minimal amount of time, I don't think it's enough. We have a lot of wonderful benefits in the mix, and people leave for various reasons. And you indicated earlier that really wasn't a problem, that we created a great place to work, and to continually work on that piece to keep it a quality and a great place to work, I think has added value than any monetary amount that we can give anyone to stay and be here. I've been in organizations where, you know, they weren't the greatest amount, you know, in paying their employees, but they loved it for other different reasons. So there's a mixture of different reasons why employees stay. Sometimes there's a family issue and they have to, unfortunately, leave and move away, maybe move out of the state or something that takes them away from their job. But to keep, as human resources is supposed to do, and you guys do an amazing job, to keep your thumbprint on, you know, just what the emotional needs of our employees are to make them happy in the workplace, I think goes well beyond any retention benefit that we could ever give them. And then how much is enough? You know, like DuPont has this, it's almost like force them into staying into an environment where they may not enjoy it. You know, if an employee really wants to leave, any amount of money is not going to keep them there. Maybe for the short term, but we want long term. And so I think for the long term incentives, it's not of the pretty much the monetary measures. It's other measures that keep employees happy and engaged and passionate. So I'm not really in favor of that for retention. However, on the recruitment side, $500 will probably not get me to sign on to an organization I'm kind of on the fence with. So maybe looking into a maybe stronger long-term programming with that, and to the short-term ARPA funds, put it into other greater use that has, you know, other benefits. And maybe figuring out a recruitment incentives that is viable and is competitive, and, you know, what's that going to cost? Probably more than 30 grand a year. But, you know, like to get a high-end director, you know, what are other competitors doing to get them to sign on? There are strategic movers and shakers, and they create the climate and the culture. You know, we want to ensure that we have the right directors in place, and to recruit more nationally rather than locally. So that's, I think, something more valuable to look at. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember McCluskey. Let's see, so the Mayor Pro Tem Figueroa is next up. I'm going to, since it's second time for him, I'm going to step in and take my first bite of the apple. Couple of things. So let's talk about recruitment. And Council, you're aware of this, but the public may not be aware of it. I'm a consultant for a regional, more of a national recruiter for local government positions, and I recruit for leadership positions around the western states. So I get involved with recruitment and familiar with incentives and familiar with often what will work. I work directly with both the client and with the applicant. The successful applicant, I'm often negotiating the contract. I mention that because it puts some context in this. So incentives do work to a certain degree. If we were to offer a hiring incentive, we probably need to be about $10,000 to get anybody's attention. And that's really just not going to change one's mind so much as help them feel really good about it. So there's another incentive that can work that is not direct dollars, and that almost every applicant, just right behind money, the next thing that a senior person wants is assurance of vacation, because they're leaving a job where they're earning 6 to 8 weeks a year, and they're starting a job at the bottom of the vacation ladder, and they're going to get 1 week a year. Doesn't feel good, and they don't usually start for that. So if there's flexibility, the vacation piece is one that perhaps a little more flexibility there. Now, we have our own ways of dealing with that. I don't get in the middle of that. I don't even know what our policies are. I don't need to know. But I'm just sharing that perspective here. We can do something to incentivize that. But it's very different than this. This, I think, is perhaps about retention to a certain extent, but largely it is more about recognition and about people that hung in there during some difficult times, and that stayed with the city when their friends, neighbors, and relatives were, moving on to something else and finding a way to change their lives because it was just so uncertain. Our folks, by and large, I don't know about universally, but just about all of them, as far as I'm aware, hung in there for the first 2 years of the pandemic. For our police officers, we provided each of them $1,000. Did that change their minds in anything? I don't think so. But it was some recognition, and it was a thank you, and I think they saw that. I think they appreciated that. But it didn't change their minds on working, being assigned to UP, particularly since we're not the direct employer. In my heart, I'm interested in doing something that recognizes our folks. And there is a sense of, there's equity about this. There's fairness between police and other employees, and too many other times, for a lot of reasons, and we're familiar with them. There gets to be a big bright line, maybe it's more blue, between the police and the line employees. And if we can help just bring those folks up to the same level in certain respects, the same sense of responsibility and respect, that's a good thing, and this might help us do that. I don't think it is going to do a darn thing for retention, though, other than address the letter of the ARPA program. And we will address the letter of the ARPA program. So I am also not interested in setting a precedent that goes to compete with our already pressing long-term financial needs. $30,000 a year ongoing would be beyond what ARPA, an external funding source that has a number of limitations in how we can use it effectively. I don't want to do something that extends beyond where that goes. But if we could get there as a recognition, maybe it's retention, maybe it's also recognition. Okay, I can get with that one. But it needs to be not something that pledges the city or implies the city will carry it on beyond the ARPA funding. But I think it does have value, and I think it could be worth doing. But we need to be. I think we want to have our eyes open about that. And $500 a year, it's a nice thank you, but it isn't. It'll keep somebody from retiring in November. They'll stay another month for the 500. They'll retire at the end of December. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And that's fine. But that's about what we'll buy with that, and that's okay. It's really more about, in my mind, the value here is over equity with police, and it's over respect and recognition that those folks hung in there in a difficult time. And we have some opportunity now to express our gratitude. So that's what I wanted to offer. But and Mayor Pro Tem, and then, excuse me, did you have your hand up too? Oh, let me get your mic on. You go before me.
Okay. Did you get Councilmember Wood next?
No, actually I have Councilmember Belisi next, then Councilmember Wood, then Councilmember Keel. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. If this was a debate class, I think this council would have done really well in this debate because I certainly, there were some very well-made points, and I listened carefully, and I think that everybody is correct in so many different ways. And I think that overall, it's not about not having a plan on how to provide value and incentive or benefit, or however you want to call it, to our employees. It's how we do it and for how long or at what stage. And I think that what I heard at least is that we need to have staff get creative and present some options and what this may look like in different forms that represent, I think, what I heard, and I truly support all of those comments myself in valuing and that's what I said too, in valuing, so I think that I just wanted to say that, but I do want to say, just as a side note, times are changing, and even here recently, which the legislation, or maybe it already has occurred, but the salaries for hiring has to be posted with a job. It has to be presented at the beginning. That was a big deal. And when you're talking about people leaving or looking for other jobs, this is going to make it so much easier for others to start looking at other jobs because now the salaries are there. Before, I don't want to hassle through all that when, this looks pretty good. Why should I? It's a hassle going through a process, but it's so much less of a hassle if you already know the salary. And I guarantee you those salaries are going to be up to par, or they're not going to recruit anyone. So I think that that's going to change, it's a game changer in how we think we're safe in our nice little city with our employees. I think that things are changing, whether it be what the governor's doing, legislation's doing with this discovery, to the way people are looking at moving and being mobile in their environment. So not that I'm stuck on this retention anymore. That's not what I'm trying to make a point on. I think that what I'm saying is I hope, and I think there's the support there, that we continue to have staff exploring and provide us with options. And this is maybe not going to be tomorrow and making this decision, but sometime this year, if we can do that, certainly it's a worthwhile endeavor and energy and time. Thank you, Mayor.
Sir, thank you, PT, appreciate it. Councilmember Belisi.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, you provided some valid points in your commentary, and I want to be clear. I am not against this idea, but I think if we are going to look at it, I would be more in favor of doing it one time in 2023 and combining both dollar amounts. To me, that sends the statement of appreciation for the tough times. And I would be more in favor of it. It doesn't appear then as a program that employees can start counting on. And it's very clear it's a one-time incentive bonus or retention bonus, whatever you want, whatever we need to call it to bypass, to get it through ARPA when they come to audit the program. Because I do think we need to do something to thank the employees that are currently here and we're working during the 2-year difficult time. So,
thank you. Councilmember Wood.
Thank you, Mayor. So first, I very much appreciate your comments, Mayor, about the retention program, or however we're going to call it. But that's, I think, a valuable perspective we need to consider going forward. When the military, how should I put it? When the airlines start hiring, the military all of a sudden finds money for retention bonuses for their pilots. When the airlines stop hiring, that money goes away. And pilots know that. The captains who are asked to sign, they're signed, okay, you're going to sign for another 6 years, and we're going to pay you $100,000 up front or at the end of that 6 years or however they do it. I think we are entering a period of time when the employees we want to keep and the employees we want to hire, it's going to be far more competitive for us to get them and do this. And so I do not think that, or I do think a retention program of some kind would be value added. Whether it's a one-year thing with $1,000, that makes a lot of sense. But definitely with the understanding that we are putting this program in place because of the anticipated competitive environment over the course of the next year. And I think we can point to a whole lot of data that says that that's out there. So I think if it's structured carefully and with a limited time frame and and I hate to say this, but I'll mention it, the military doesn't give that $100,000 bonus to privates in the infantry. They give it to pilots.
That's right.
We might want to look at our harder to retain or harder to recruit fields if we're going to go to larger bonuses. That doesn't get after what the mayor was saying as far as the thank you for being here, plus thank you for sticking it out. And I actually find that very value added. That's why I hesitate to bring that up. But, if we're truly in a competitive environment, there's going to be some areas that are more competitive than others, and we may want to consider that as we push forward. But I am in favor of moving forward with something, but how we get there, I'm flexible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Wood. Councilmember Keel.
Thank you, Mayor. Great discussion. I appreciate Councilmember Wood's comment about the pilots versus the privates, and that gets to the point that you were making, Mayor, about the $10,000 bonus, and that's, for retention. And I'm not a recruiter, but I've been recruited, right? And yes, those are the numbers, but those are for leadership positions, right? For technicians, I've been on the other end where I've hired technicians and managers, and I didn't give them $10,000, you know, 5, 6, you know, something like that, more appropriate. So I think there's some wiggle room in that to have that discussion. I like your idea also about you know, focusing it on people that have stuck it out with us. That resonates with me, right? Because, I mean, as everyone knows, the world shut down, and it was hard to do anything, you know, and to honor and support and say thank you to employees that stayed at home and you know, called Comcast and brought back their computers and wired up their house and all that stuff that they did so that they can still provide services to the citizens of UP. I think we need to say thank you for that. And I like Councilman Belisi's, you know, kind of let's do it one time and be done with it and not make it look programmatic. You know, I think there's a lot of value, at least in my mind, to that. Now, having said all of that, and I don't know if this is possible, but I think that there still is a need for the difficult recruitments, okay, to find out. And again, ARPA's got to be committed by 2024 and be spent by 2026. But in that window of time, I'm sure there are positions that we can hire. I mean, and focus. And so I don't know if there's enough to kind of do both, or how do you work it? You know, maybe it's 750 instead of 1,000. I don't know for thank you. And we use some of that, just something to where we can bring in the other people, because it's when you have positions that are open for long periods of time, or you hire a person and they're here for what, 6 months, 7 months, and then they leave. You know, I mean, that's hard too. You know, so I think I'm hoping there's some room to do both. Thank you, Mayor.
Good. Thank you, Councilmember Keel. Any other comments on this? Okay. All right. Well, good. Well, it was a good discussion, and I appreciate that. I think everybody contributed well. So I'm going to, we have some interest, some support. There's a little, I think you may have a sense of possible paths that can get us to where we'd like to be, and see how that test to the ARPA rules, of course, is all part of it too. But if there's nothing further, we, I think, are done with our agenda for this evening. So, we're a few minutes early, yes.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
I have nothing to say.
All right. Well,
this is the longest meeting we've had all year.
Indeed, you're right.
Enjoy it while you can.
Yes, exactly. Well, we are adjourned.